So far, we've looked at a bunch of stuff, text kind of stuff about taxes, and we just stuck our noses back into our supply and demand framework to look at how taxes affect the market. And what we could see from that first glance is that when a tax is imposed in the market, doesn't matter whether it's levied on the seller, the buyers and the sellers share the burden of that tax in the form of the price rising and the price received falling, with the gap being exactly equal to the amount of the tax. We also saw that the quantity bought and sold in the market will be less, such that taxes reduce the size of markets. But now I have to take us back to something slightly separate from that model as a concept, and then we're going to tie it back into that model. What I'm talking about is called consumer and seller surplus, and taxes affect this surplus. So let me first make sure I clearly define, or try to clearly define, what I mean by seller and consumer surplus. So here's our market again. So this time, before I impose the tax, I want to examine more about supply and demand than we've ever looked at before. Here's our demand curve, downward sloping. As the price rises, consumers are willing and able to buy less. Supply curve is upward sloping. As the price rises, sellers are willing and able to buy or sell, produce more, right? And then we have, at this unique price, and only at this unique price, quantity supplied is equal to the quantity demanded. So this is our equilibrium price and quantity. Now let's examine what's going on in these triangles a little bit more than we ever have before. So our demand curve represents the willingness of the consumers to buy various quantities of the good at various prices, right? Now, some people, let's call them rich people, might be willing to pay a higher price than the equilibrium price, right? Does that make sense? I mean, some people, in the car business, I've heard it said, one day I spent an entire day at a used car lot going back and forth. I was helping my stepfather. He used to sell tires wholesale, and he was real busy one time, and so he asked me to help him deliver cars. So I went back and forth from the tire dealership to the car dealership, putting new tires on used cars. And he and I were taking turns, like, bringing two cars at a time, right? And so there was periods of time where I'd be sitting there waiting for him to bring another car so we could get a ride back and go get two more cars, kind of thing. And I heard it said in that business, there's an ass for every seat. So, get it? It's a homonym, like it's a figure of speech, but also they're car seats. Some people are willing to pay a very high price, but not most people, just some people. So at very high prices, the quantity demanded is low, but they're out there. At equilibrium, do they have to pay that higher price that they're actually willing to pay? No. They get to enjoy that price. Somebody who was willing to spend this much for only a little bit, because there aren't many of them, gets to get it at a lower price. That gap is called consumer surplus. I like to call it cha-ching. Have you ever gone into a store? I know the answer is yes. You've gone into the store for a particular item. You are there to buy a particular thing. And you know what it should cost. And you're fully willing and able to spend X dollars for this thing that you're there to buy. And then you go over to the shelf and you get there, and the thing that you were going to buy at full price is on sale. Cha-ching. That's consumer surplus. It's happened to everyone. We tend to doom and gloom over prices. Oh, everything's more expensive than we want to spend. But it does happen. Cha-ching happens to everyone. You get to enjoy it at a lower price than you were actually willing to pay. Now, it's easy, and you see that, you might put that on Facebook or Instagram. Whoa, look at this picture. Whoa, take a picture of this shelf. Oh, can you believe this price? Whoa, whoa, whoa. Guess what? That's actually true all the way down to the last penny. We just wouldn't post about it. If we were actually willing to spend a penny more than it actually is, we wouldn't even notice that. We don't want to get tested to how much we're really only willing to spend. But it's there. We just don't celebrate it. So this whole triangle then, all of this up here, is called consumer surplus. It's the various quantities that are being purchased at a price lower than what people are actually willing to spend for those quantities at the equilibrium price. That whole triangle. That's triangle A, and A stands for consumer surplus. Cha-ching. Now let's think about this triangle. Sellers. Some sellers will work for very little. Not most sellers. Some sellers. This is working for very little. This is a low price. Some people are willing and able to produce only a little. Not most, but some. We're the sellers of our labor. Here's what's going to happen to you one day. You're going to graduate. I would put that off as long as you can. Transfer, change majors, stretch it out, make college last. College is great, the rest, college is a great time in life. You might not think so all the time. It is. Make it last. Probably maybe not share this video with your parents. But eventually you're going to graduate. And when you graduate, then begins the job search, which is an unpleasant time. Most of the time. Finding a job isn't that easy. It's stressful. You'll have a lot of trade-offs to make. It's generally not that pleasant. I think most people would agree. You're going to go through interviews and you're going to probably get shot down. You're going to struggle to get an interview. Then you're going to get some interviews and you're not going to get calls. It's like that. It's a humbling time for most people. Not always. Sometimes you just luck out or whatever. Boom, you nail it the first time. Get exactly what you want. Usually not. So eventually you're going to graduate. You're going to get into this stage, and you're probably, in most people's cases, going to be feeling pretty run down. And you're going to be sitting across a desk from some person at some interview. Hopefully across a desk and not through Zoom or whatever. And maybe it'll be through online. Who knows? And then something different is going to happen. The person's going to make you a job offer. Now, when you're interviewing, you have some idea of what you should be getting paid for the kind of job you're interviewing for. You know that. Maybe not exactly, maybe not right up to the penny, but some idea. So let's say you're a recent college graduate. Let's say you go on, you finish your bachelor's degree. You're in the state of Maryland. The median starting salary in the state of Maryland is probably starting median Maryland last I looked. It's probably about $45,000, something like that. And you can anchor to that. And you say, well, yeah, but I have terrible grades. Maybe I should expect something lower than that. I have great grades. Maybe I should expect something higher than that. I have a really sought after degree. I have an IT degree. Maybe I expect something higher than that. I have a general studies degree or something. I'm not trying to pick on any degrees, but there are different starting salaries for different degrees. So you can anchor to that, or you could look up what the starting salary should be. And when you're in the interview, you should have a feel for what to expect. So let's say you're sitting at that interview. You're expecting to get an offer of $45,000 because you have good grades, decent major, recent graduate, state of Maryland. And that's what you have in mind as being what you're willing and able to work for. And then the offer comes. And the person across the desk says, okay, we'd like to offer you a position. And that's exciting. But of course, then there's uncertainty. Because you're like, what's next? 20,000? I had that happen to me. So anyway, they say, we'd like to offer you a position. And you say, and you're like, okay. And they say, would you be willing to come work for us for, let's say, $62,000? You were in there expecting 45, hoping for 45. They say 62. What do? Oh, think about it, right? You gotta wear that game face. Because you haven't discussed benefits or anything else, right? You want to put on that game face. It'll be hard. And hopefully this happens to every one of you. That does happen. It does. Let's think about what that means in terms of our model. You were willing to work for something less. You get offered something higher. You are the seller of your labor. That is cha-ching, seller surplus. This whole bottom triangle is seller surplus. All down here. How about that? Now, surplus is that entire area of the larger triangle that you see there. It's all surplus in a free market without taxes. There's nobody who can be made better off without making someone else worse off. Like if the price falls, that cuts into seller surplus, but it raises consumer surplus. If the price rises, it goes the other way. That gives more seller surplus, but less consumer surplus. That's called efficient. Specifically, it's called Pareto efficient when no one can be made better off without making someone else worse off. That's getting the most out of our resources because everyone's as well off as everyone as a whole can be. All the surplus is there. I'm going to stop this video, give you time to digest it, rewind it, do what you need to do, and then I'm going to come back and mess with it with taxes.